Look at Persepolis. Those 70-foot stone columns have been standing for over 2,500 years. Earthquakes couldn't bring them down. Armies couldn't erase them. Time couldn't swallow them. And yet, the story told about the people who built them, that story is falling apart right now because of DNA. For generations, Iranian school books have taught one version of history. Noble Aryan warriors rode in from the north, settled this land, and built one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen. Pure bloodline, clear origin, simple story. But in 2019, a team of Iranian scientists, Dr. Merju, Dr. Fatahi, and 9 of their colleagues, ran a full genome study on over 1,000 Iranians across 11 different ethnic groups. It was one of the biggest genetic studies ever done on Iranian people. And what they found was not what the textbooks said. The dominant ancestry in modern Iranians does not trace back to northern steppe warriors. It traces back to farmers, ancient farmers who lived in the Zagros mountains of Iran over 10,000 years ago. People whose bones scientists have pulled out of caves and tested. People who were growing goats and barley thousands of years before anyone called this place Persia. Now here's why this matters today. In modern Iran, the Aryan origin story isn't just a history lesson. It's personal identity. It's family pride. It's the answer millions of people give when someone asks, "Where do you really come from?" And DNA is quietly changing that answer. If you are someone who loves these kinds of stories, lost histories, ancient DNA, civilizations that were not what they seemed, subscribe right now. Because what's coming next in this video is going to hit harder than anything you've read in a history book. Now, before we go further, drop a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Pakistan, Iran, USA, UK, somewhere else? And did you ever think the Aryan origin story of Persia might have been exaggerated? Let me know below. I read every single comment. Because here's the thing. The steppe warriors did exist. They did arrive. But when they arrived and what they actually changed, that is a completely different story from what was taught. And the truth of that story starts with a king who didn't discover history. He invented it. Reza Shah Pahlavi, the ruler of Iran, made an announcement to the world. From this point on, the country would no longer be called Persia. It would be called Iran, a word that comes from an old Sanskrit root meaning land of the Aryans. This wasn't just a name change, this was identity engineering. In the years that followed, Iranian schools, state radio, and government media all pushed one message. Iranians are a pure Aryan people. Their ancestors came from the great northern steppes. They are connected by blood to the ancient warrior tradition that built civilization. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Reza Shah didn't come up with this alone. He borrowed it. He took it from European race theorists of the 1930s, scholars who were themselves being used by Nazi Germany to give scientific backing to racial superiority ideas. The same ideology, the same language, just applied to a different throne. Dear Professor David Reich of Harvard University, one of the world's leading ancient DNA scientists, the man who has personally studied the genomes of over 16,000 ancient humans, says this directly. Ancient DNA reveals surprise after surprise, often in tension with what we thought we knew, based on archaeology, linguistics, and history. Iran is one of the clearest examples of that on the planet. And now young Iranians, especially in the diaspora in Europe and America, are taking DNA tests. And when the results come back, they don't say Aryan warrior. They say Zagros Neolithic, Caucasus, Anatolian, sometimes a little South Asian, occasionally Central Asian. Not the story their grandparents told them. But here is the real mystery. Wait, if the steppe contribution was smaller than the myth required, then why does the Persian language sound like a cousin of Sanskrit and Latin? How do you speak an Indo-European language if the Indo-European people didn't really come in large numbers? That question has an answer, and the answer is going to make you look at language itself in a completely different way. Look at this inscription. This is the Behistun rock, carved into a cliff face in western Iran by order of Darius the Great, around 520 BCE. It is written in Old Persian, one of the world's oldest written languages. And Old Persian is unmistakably Indo-European. Linguists can trace it directly. It shares grammar structures with Sanskrit, with Latin, with Greek. But here's the problem. The people who carved that inscription, and the vast majority of people who lived under Darius, genetically descended from those same Zagros Neolithic farmers we talked about. Farmers who had been on this land for thousands of years. Farmers whose DNA looked nothing like the steppe populations that gave rise to Indo-European languages. So, how does a genome and a language tell completely opposite stories? Scientists have a name for this. They call it elite dominance. A small group, militarily powerful, politically in control, imposes their language on a much larger population they rule. The larger population doesn't get replaced. They just adopt the new tongue, generation by generation, until it becomes their own. The 2016 Science Journal study by Dr. Bruschaki and her team confirms this. Zagros farmers were so genetically distinct that they were clearly a separate world from the populations that carried Indo-European languages. The language was imported, the people were not. Now think about what that means for Farsi. Farsi, the language of Rumi, Hafez, and Omar Khayyam. One of the most beautiful literary languages in human history. The language of Persian poetry that has moved people to tears for 1,000 years. That language may have arrived as the tongue of a ruling class, a small elite whose words were so powerful, backed by empire, by law, by prestige, that millions of Zagros-descended people absorbed it, owned it, and turned it into art. And that's not a sad story. That's actually remarkable. But there's something even older hiding in the Iranian genome, something that arrived before the steppe warriors, before the Zagros farmers settled, before any of this. Scientists found a signal they couldn't explain, and they had to give it a special name. They called them ghost people. In genetics, a ghost population is something very specific. It's a group of people so ancient, so lost to time, that we have never found their bones, but we know they existed because their DNA quietly echoes inside living humans today. And there is a ghost population inside the Iranian genome. Researchers kept seeing a signal, small but real, that didn't match Zagros Neolithic ancestry, didn't match steppe ancestry, didn't match anything from the known Near East populations. It matched something called Ancient North Eurasians, or ANE for short. These were people who lived across northern Eurasia during the last ice age. They are related to the ancient ancestors of Native Americans and some Siberian groups, and somehow, tens of thousands of years ago, their genetic thread wound its way into the Iranian plateau. In 2016, Dr. Gallego Lorente and her team at University College London sequenced the genome of a 10,000-year-old woman from Ganj Dareh, a Neolithic site in the Zagros Mountains of Iran. That ancient woman's DNA carried this same signal. This ghost was already there at the very dawn of Iranian prehistory. Now think about what this means. Iran was not just a crossroads of migrations we already know about. It was a meeting point of migrations we have barely started to understand. People from the frozen north, carrying DNA connected to Ice Age Siberia, reached the Iranian plateau and left a thread that has never fully disappeared. They left no monuments, no writing, no mythology with their names in it, just a quiet signal in every Iranian person alive today. And here is where it gets even more interesting. Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion, contains a concept called Aryan, a primordial paradise in the far north, destroyed by a supernatural winter. Scholars have always called this a myth. But what if it's something else? What if it's a story, passed down generation after generation, slowly changing shape, that began as a real memory of Ice Age people migrating south from the frozen north? What if Persian mythology is, in fragments, a genetic memory? We can't prove that, not yet. But science keeps finding the same thing. Ancient Iranian DNA carries 3 layers, not 2. Ice Age north, Zagros farming south, steppe warrior east. The Aryan story was 1 layer out of 3. And now, the 2025 study, the biggest one ever done on ancient Iranian genomes, pulled these 3 layers together and looked directly at the Achaemenid period, at Darius, at Xerxes, at the rulers of the Persian Empire itself. And what came out of those graves was not what anyone expected. There is a cliff face near Persepolis called Naksh-i Rostam. Into that cliff, the greatest rulers of the Achaemenid Empire carved their tombs, Darius the Great, Xerxes, Artaxerxes. These men commanded an empire that stretched from Egypt all the way to northern India. They were the most powerful humans alive in their time. In 2025, a research team led by Dr. M.A. Amjadi and colleagues published the most comprehensive ancient DNA study ever done on Iranian populations. They analyzed 50 samples from 9 different archaeological sites across Iran, covering a time span from 4700 BCE all the way to 1300 CE, published in Scientific Reports, the Nature Journal family. What did they find at the Achaemenid sites? The ruling class, the Achaemenid era individuals, carried a genetic profile mostly consistent with the northern Iranian plateau populations. Same Zagros Neolithic base. Some slightly elevated steppe signal in the ruling lineage, consistent with their claimed Indo-Iranian ancestry. But the broad Iranian population, still carrying that ancient Neolithic foundation. 3,000 years of people living, farming, trading, warring, building empires, and the genetic core of Iran barely moved. The researchers called it remarkable. The long-term cultural and biological continuity in and around the Zagros area. Now, let's pause on Cyrus the Great for a moment. Cyrus the Great wrote the Cyrus cylinder, a small clay barrel discovered in Babylon that is now considered the world's first declaration of human rights. He freed enslaved people. He allowed conquered populations to practice their own religions. He is remembered as one of history's most humane rulers. Cyrus was, genetically, part of a ruling class that was somewhat distinct from the full Iranian population. But he governed with justice that had nothing to do with bloodline. DNA and moral character are not the same thing. They never were, and the ancient bones make that very clear. Now, here comes the chapter that everyone argues about, i.e. the one that sparks the most heated debates in Iranian diaspora communities around the world. 637 CE Arab armies at the gates of Persia, the Islamic conquest. Did it change the Iranian genome? 637 CE, the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah. Arab armies shattered the Sasanian Empire in one of history's most decisive military collapses. Within a generation, Iran had a new script, a new official language of religion, and a new ruling power. From the outside, everything changed, but inside the genome, something remarkable held. Dr. Merju and her team's 2019 PLOS genetics study is clear. Modern Iranians show minimal Arab genetic contribution, typically between 5 and 10% on a population-wide level, mostly concentrated in border regions and coastal areas. The Arab conquest, which was one of the most total cultural transformations in recorded history, left almost no genetic fingerprint on the Iranian interior. And this actually makes perfect sense when you understand what Islamic conquest meant. Islamic law, from the very beginning, forbade forced displacement of conquered peoples. It forbade racial replacement. The Quran explicitly commands Muslims to treat people of the book, which included Persian Zoroastrians, with justice. This was not a colonization project. It was a faith-based transformation. The genome confirms the history. Arabs came to Iran as soldiers, as administrators, as traders, and as scholars. They did not come to replace the population, and the Iranian people, with their deep roots and ancient identity, absorbed the new faith without surrendering their biological continuity. And from that meeting, Persian language plus Arabic script plus Islamic spiritual fire, came some of the greatest literature humanity has ever produced. The Shahnameh, the Masnavi, the Rubaiyat, written in borrowed letters, full of Arabic loanwords, and completely unmistakably Persian at its soul. Now, I want to ask you something genuinely. Drop a comment. Did you think the Arab conquest had changed Iranian DNA heavily? A lot of people assume it did. Does this science change what you thought? Tell me honestly. But here's the thing. If the Arab conquest left almost no genetic trace, what about the one that came next? The one that didn't come to rule? The one that came to destroy? 1258 CE, 7 days. That is how long it took Hulagu Khan's Mongol armies to reduce Baghdad, the greatest city in the medieval world, but home to the House of Wisdom, center of the Islamic Golden Age, to ash and rubble. In Iran, the devastation was even worse. Historical sources describe entire cities emptied, Ancient irrigation systems, the ones that had kept Iranian agriculture alive for thousands of years, deliberately broken apart. Libraries burned, scholars killed. This was not conquest. This was erasure. So what did the genome say? Here is where the science gets precise. Genomic studies detect a measurable East Asian ancestry signal in specific parts of Iran, between 2 and 8%, concentrated in northeastern Iran, Azerbaijan, and parts of Khorasan, precisely the regions where Mongol and Timurid presence was most sustained over time. But the Alborz mountain communities, the high Zagros valleys, the isolated plateaus, near zero East Asian signal. For geography protected them in a way that walls could not. The 2025 study by Amjadi and colleagues confirms it. The core of the ancient Iranian gene pool remained stable across centuries, even after the Mongols, even after Tamerlane, even after the Timurids rebuilt on ruins. And now think about who was doing the preserving. Not the city scholars, not the palace poets, not the educated elite of the great urban centers. Those populations were the most heavily reached, the most mixed. The mountain farmers, the high valley herders. The people history books barely mention. They became, without knowing it, the biological custodians of ancient Iran. The people civilization ignored ended up saving what civilization built. The Ilkhanate, the Mongol dynasty that controlled Iran, converted to Islam within 2 generations. Once the conquerors became Persian in culture, the genome mixed slightly, but Iran absorbed them, as it had absorbed every wave before. But now we get to the most important discovery of the entire video. Something living, something right now. A population inside Iran's borders today that carries DNA so ancient. Scientists said they might only have 1 generation left to study it before it's gone forever. Go to the Caspian coast of Iran, the region of Mazandaran. Dense forests, humid air, green valleys cut by rivers running down from the Alborz mountains. This is nothing like the Iran most people picture, and the people here are genetically different. Studies consistently show that Mazandarani and Gilaki populations carry elevated Zagros Neolithic ancestry and significantly reduced steppe contribution compared to plateau Iranians. Then they didn't fully mix with the Bronze Age steppe arrivals. Their geography kept them at enough distance that the ancient signal persisted. The same is true for certain isolated communities in the high Zagros valleys and parts of Luristan. Together, these communities form something remarkable, a living genetic archive. A scattered, still-breathing record of what Iranian DNA looked like before the empires, before the conquests, before the mixing began. Dr. Brushaki's team noted in their research that Zagros farmers' DNA most closely resembles populations from modern Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and particularly Iranian Zoroastrians, making these isolated communities a crucial genetic window into the deep past. But here is the painful part. These communities are shrinking, not because of war, not because of conquest, because of highways. There's mobile phones, jobs in Tehran, young people marrying outside their villages. The same economic forces that are reshaping the world are reshaping these gene pools. Within 2 or 3 generations, the specific ancient signals these communities carry may dilute beyond recovery. The oldest DNA story in Iran, not being destroyed by armies or empires, being quietly dissolved by modernity. One researcher described trying to sample these communities before the signal fades as reading a manuscript that's dissolving in your hands. They also speak distinct languages, Gilaki, Mazandarani, Luri, with grammatical features that may preserve speech patterns older than Achaemenid Farsi. Their seasonal festivals and rituals trace to agricultural cycles that predate any Persian empire. They are not marginal, they are original. And here, I want to ask you something. If you or someone in your family has ever done a DNA test, 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, or anything else, what came back? Did anything surprise you? Write it in the comments. I genuinely want to know what people are finding, because this brings us to the most current chapter of the whole story. Right now, 2024 and 2025. Consumer DNA testing has reached Iranian communities worldwide. Millions of people are submitting their saliva and waiting for an algorithm to tell them who they are. And what the algorithm is returning is not what the textbook taught. A young Iranian-American woman in Los Angeles opens her DNA results. The screen breaks her ancestry into percentages. 34% Iranian Plateau, 18% Caucasus, 12% Anatolian, 9% South Asian, 7% Central Asian. Smaller fragments pointing toward the Levant, toward Siberia, toward places she has never been and never imagined. She stares at the screen for a long time. This is not the story her grandmother told her. This is happening to millions of people right now. Iranian diaspora communities in the US, in the UK, in Germany, and Canada are sharing their DNA results in Telegram groups, Discord servers, and YouTube comment sections. And every single time someone posts a result that shows unexpected Arab ancestry, or Turkic ancestry, or South Asian ancestry, the debate gets heated fast. Because identity, which used to be handed down through family stories and national pride, is now being handed out by an algorithm. But here's something important to understand. These tests are not perfect. The reference panels that define Iranian ancestry are built from modern populations who are themselves already mixed. The algorithm cannot tell the difference between a Zagros Neolithic signal and a modern Kurdish or Lur person's DNA. The results feel certain. Science would actually call them preliminary. People are making profound identity decisions based on numbers that even the researchers who build these tests describe as approximate. This connects to something a lot of you might have seen. In my last video, the one about Polynesian DNA and where Polynesians really came from, so many of you commented that you had no idea science could contradict history this completely. People were saying their school curriculum felt entirely different after watching. If you haven't seen that one, it's linked in the description. Yeah, and if you did see it, does this feel similar? Does it hit the same way? Tell me in the comments. Back in Iran itself, these tests exist in a complicated space. The government has raised concerns about foreign companies holding Iranian genetic data. And honestly, those concerns are not entirely unreasonable. But the tests spread anyway. Because people want to know, even when knowing is complicated, even when the answer doesn't match the family story. And underneath all of it, underneath the apps and the arguments and the percentages and the national identity debates, there is one question that no DNA test has ever answered. A question that haunts the scientists themselves. A question this entire video has been building towards. The Cyrus cylinder sits in the British Museum, a small terracotta barrel, carved in 539 BCE. In it, Cyrus the Great declares that conquered people should be free, that forced labor should end, that people should be allowed to return to their homes and worship their own gods. History calls it the world's first human rights declaration. Cyrus wrote that. A man who was, genetically, a composite of migrations he never knew existed. Zagros Neolithic farmers, steppe arrivals, Ice Age echoes. He didn't know any of that. He just knew what he believed was right. And here is what the science, for all its precision, cannot tell us. It cannot tell us what any of this means. DNA can trace when populations moved. It can measure who mixed with whom. It can detect signals from 15,000 years ago. It can find Ice Age echoes in a living person's blood, but it cannot tell us whether identity is biology, or whether biology is simply the ground that identity walks on. Every major claim about Persian origins contains a fragment of the truth. The Aryan migration happened, but smaller than the myth required. The Zagros farmer foundation is real, and deeper than any empire acknowledged. The Arab conquest transformed culture and barely touched the genome. The Mongols left a scar, and Iran absorbed them anyway. The genome is not a proof of who you are. It is a record of every encounter your ancestors survived. And then there is no ruse. Every year, at the spring equinox, Iranian families around the world set a table called the Haft Scene. They light fires. They jump over flames. They celebrate the moment winter ends and the world begins again. This tradition is older than Islam, older than Zoroastrianism in its current form. Some researchers believe its roots go back to Zagros Neolithic seasonal ceremonies, festivals of survival and renewal practiced 10,000 years ago by people whose names we will never know. The genome changes, century by century, conquest by conquest. The fire keeps burning. And the 2025 study by Amjadi and colleagues, the most comprehensive ancient Iranian genome study ever published, still has gaps. The crucial window between 4000 and 2000 BCE, when the steppe arrivals were actually mixing with Zagros populations in real time, that period is still mostly unsampled. The skeletons that would answer the deepest questions are still in the ground. Somewhere beneath the Iranian plateau, beneath the oil pipelines and the highways and the ruins of 40 empires, there are bones that no laboratory has opened yet. Yeah, and when scientists finally do open them, the answer will not confirm what any government, any nationalist movement, or any ancestry app expected. It never does. The story of Persian DNA is not finished. It is barely started.